Well, listen, this is how we always see if a guy is a real Chicago Bears sports fan. So, Joey, first question, really the most important question. I didn't pop. This is the one I'm just popping on you. This is no pre-recorded stuff or pre-planned. Why was Lance Briggs so much better than Brian Urlacher?
Oh wow. Wow, that's a great question. What's the easy answer there? What's the complicated answer? The first one was when you have Tommy Harris in the middle, right? I guess
Yeah,
typically
great
the
answer.
opponent's
Yep.
going to go to the left or the right on the edges, and that's where Lance Briggs was there. He was there hunting the football. Lance Briggs, incredibly underrated player. Brian Urlacher, you can always put him picking off Aaron Rodgers into the Hall of Fame clips, right? And it looks really, really good. But man, Lance Briggs on a play-to-play basis, one of the best Bears players I've ever seen in my lifetime.
I couldn't agree more. Amon and I always talk about this. He is maybe the most wildly underrated Bears linebacker of all time. He hit like a Matt truck.
Yeah, he had the Scottie Pippen career. Honestly, Brian Urlacher got paid. Briggs kind of didn't. He always had that contract dispute a little bit with the organization. He left when Mark Trestman became head coach to open up a restaurant. He did a lot of Scottie Pippen-esque things, but who would Brian Urlacher be without Lance Briggs?
Yeah, so the only thing I would say there from a player standpoint, like he was not Scottie. Like Scottie Pippen was great, but we don't think that Brian Urlacher was like the Michael Jordan to hit Scottie Pippen.
I hear you.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I hear you.
But I will say this: like I never forget when you want to immediately get respect from the opposing team. I'll never forget we're in Soldier Field and we look up on the stadium like the jumbotron, and Briggs is up there with his arms crossed and he's got like black sunglasses on. And we're going like, who the hell is this guy? Right. Like one of those deals. And then I think it was me. I think he leveled me like the next play. I was like, oh, wow, this guy's pretty good. So
he's that dude. The guy can hit, has sneaky speed and technician tackler, right?
We could talk about a couple different linebackers in this game as well. So the Packers, let me just get into this. The Packers are 2-2 in opening day games under Matt LaFleur. He's had some great, obviously some 13-3 seasons. But the last 2 years, 38-3 loss to the Saints in 2021. Last year, we got a complete embarrassment, 23-7 at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings. The Bears, on the other hand, coming in last year, now up and down season, the whole deal. Got a lot of learning experiences for Justin Fields, but you start off the year 19-10 victory, gets the San Francisco 49ers in that like mud game. We're just talking about a slog fest. Matt Eberflus is coming into this season, and one of the things he's kind of putting out there is like, listen, we actually think we're better than a lot of teams at a lot of positions. And even talking about the Packers, we feel like there's some areas that we're better than them, not just at quarterback. Where do you find that to be true, being a guy that's following the Bears a lot closer than we are?
Well, let's start with just the week one matchups right now. If I noticed correctly, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are not on the field today. They're not practicing on a Wednesday. That's a little bit of a concern, right? So just for right now, I am going to probably put our wide receiver group. And hamstrings. I mean, that at any moment, right? Any moment injury. So right now, I'm probably going to put our wide receivers maybe a touch above the Green Bay Packers at that position group. But when we're talking about Matt Eberflus, I think what he's really trying to drill into is that we spent significant capital, significant dollars on upgrading the linebacker room after trading Roquan Smith last year. So they have high hopes for Terrell Edmonds. They got high hopes for TJ Edwards. I mean, I hear you. And
those guys are great.
He's hoping.
Can you explain to me that whole, I understand the thought process, I guess, of getting rid of your two best defensive players in the middle of the season if you're not going to win anyways. But then you bring in Tremaine Edwards, who's a great player. Is it Edmonds or Matt Milano on that Bills defense? They're both excellent. And then TJ Edwards is a great player. But Roquan Smith was like, I don't know, top 3 backer in the league. Like, we don't get it.
I mean, a couple of things, right? And you played the game, and not only that, but also you dealt with organizations before, especially when a guy like Ryan Poles comes in. Roquan Smith is not his guy that he drafted. He puts a certain number or a valuation on a player. They begin contract negotiations. Roquan Smith is his own agent, and Roquan Smith wanted a 2 in front of his number on his annual salary. The Chicago Bears said no, and a year later, what are we doing? We're paying Terrell Edmonds. Figure out $17 million, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, I think as a general manager, you try and play hardball, you try and place these valuations on these players, but really it was a bit of a forest beyond the trees situation there where at the end of the year, he looked and he said, man, I got to fill this position. And what did he fill it with? He filled it with dollars. So I 100% agree with you. Roquan Smith, I mean, when we talk about Lance Briggs, when we talk about a Brian Urlacher in Chicago Bears history, Roquan Smith was on that path to be one of those guys and is going to come down to $3 million a year. I mean, I guess you can maybe spin it and say that allows you to sign a guy like TJ Edwards and provide a little bit more depth. But yeah, that's the path that they chose, and they believe that that group is better this year. And I think also now, whenever you have Jair Alexander on your team, I'm going to pause, but I will say that Matt Eberflus believes that the Bears secondary is a young group on the come this season. When you look at a guy like Jalen Johnson trying to get paid, Eddie Jackson's probably the veteran of that group, and then you have Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, and hopefully Tyreek Stevenson. He does hope, I'm not saying right now, but I think he does think eventually that position group will be not just a strength of the team, but also a strength among other position groups when they play.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, Jair Alexander's probably top 2 or 3 cornerback, best at his position in the league. But we have so many, like we have 8 first-round draft picks on defense, and we're looking around. The fact that we can have this conversation, whether you're talking about the linebacker room, whether you're talking about, it's kind of nuts to think about with so many first-round picks. But I would agree in the sentiment that if you're looking at the linebacker room, like I love Jack Sanborn the way he played last year. I don't know how many times snaps he's getting on the field. If they're going to have to go to base defense, they're going to be a nickel the whole time. I love the way he played. Even when he shows up in preseason, the guy just makes plays constantly on the field. So I love that room for you. Quay Walker for us, first round pick last year, obviously coming out of the Georgia program, has a lot of development to do in terms of being able to get off blocks and make tackles at the line of scrimmage, not 8 yards downfield. Devontae Campbell had a great year 2 years ago, had some injuries last year, wasn't the same player. So can he regain his form? So I'm with you on the linebacker room for sure. I'm with you on the DB room. Like it's a toss up. Rasul Douglas had that great year. He came back last year, got paid. It's like, is he a guy that he's going to make some plays, but it's always like the best players in the league don't get the ball thrown to them that much. So if you have a ton of picks or if you're having a ton of pass, there's a reason for that because guys are going after you because you have Alexander on the other side. We have nothing at safety.
That's a great point.
Yeah, you guys are looking at safety like Brisker and Eddie Jackson in 7th year out of Alabama. Like those guys are one up and coming, one good. I know your nickel quarter, Kyler Gordon, is another up and coming. I like watching him play last year. We are, as Packers fans, as just somebody who likes to study the game, I don't know what we look like at safety. Like I like Ford. Darnell Savage is he in a reclamation project right now with his career? How we just don't know what that's going to look like. He certainly has the speed to play center field. We can bring Ford down and play in the box. Is that the kind of? I think the big thing here is when you look at the DBs and just that structure. Your defense likes to play a lot of single high, a lot of man coverage. They're not afraid to make mistakes. Our guys still are. I don't think our players are afraid to make mistakes, but we're not utilizing the talent. So just for that reason alone, that might be one of the rooms where I go, they might have the advantage. Now, Joey, let me run a couple of these by you because I kind of wrote down a couple of rooms. I thought, I don't know, these might be arguments. I love your running back room. I love our running back room. I love your running back room too. That's maybe an even Steven room for me. The linebacker room we talked about, the tight end room. Now you brought in some of our guys. But Mercedes Lewis to me,
two of them.
yeah. But, so Cole Kmet's a great player. Tunyon, we'll see what you get out of Tunyon. Honestly, I don't think Packers are. That organization wasn't too upset about losing him. Mercedes Lewis is one of those guys. When I say he's a glue guy for the entire building. And I don't know if he's shown up there yet as far as what he's brought to the organization. I don't know if you can speak on that a little bit, but he just makes a huge difference being around.
Yeah, from what I understand, I mean, all of it is BTS behind the scenes, like you're talking about. You're not really going to hear him in the box score. I don't really think you're going to hear him even in training camp notes about making a lot of plays. I do think he might be able to catch a couple of touchdowns, just a couple of breakaways, right? Like at some point during the season. And we all get an opportunity.
It would have to breakaway would have to be a fall down, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
No, like he's just alone on the 3-yard line. But yeah, no, I just think what's really important and why they probably brought him into that room is, first of all, when you're looking at an offensive line, it's still a makeshift unit that this Bears team is trying to put together and gel. Now they have some returning pieces, right? But they want those returning pieces to turn into foundation pieces. I'm talking about Braxton Jones at left tackle. Obviously, Darnell Wright getting drafted at right tackle coming into this year. I still think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities where they're going to have to go on with some heavy sets here just to try and protect Justin Fields. I still think our offense is based around that running back room and that running game, because then I think you just want everyone a half step slow when you break into play action, and then Justin Fields gets a chance to do the magic that he wants to do. So having a guy like Mercedes Lewis in the room, I think is going to be great on the field. And as you mentioned, though, more importantly in the locker room, what the Chicago Bears saw last year was one of the worst offensive performances the first 4 weeks of the season. And then they had a 6-week stretch where they averaged almost 30 points a game and then came back to earth. What that says to me is they need someone in that room that can keep a little bit of a base level, right? I think they need to build consistent habits. They need to build consistency within their offense. I think Mercedes Lewis is the kind of guy that can provide that. And hopefully just in the room, in the meetings, that's the kind of thing that's going to help them, hopefully take it to the next level offensively this year.
I love I thought Darnell Wright was the best tackle prospect in the draft. I can't say enough good. I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see how he plays. I think he's amazing. Mercedes Lewis is probably the best technical blocker on your team. Just I've watched enough film of the Bears. I'm just telling you, he's much better than anybody. Yeah. He's much better than Darnell Wright, Patrick Lucas. I mean, he's just better than those guys. Now he might not have the same effectiveness because he's 34 years old or whatever he is, and 270 pounds. But I'm just saying they can learn so much just by the way he goes about his business. I think it's going to be a huge pickup. And then back to the wide receiver room, bringing in DJ Moore. That's a huge deal. I want to know what are Bears fans, because we had a chance to get Chase Claypool. And I think the sentiment on this particular podcast, we were like, nah, we're good. It's all, you guys go ahead and take him. All good. Now, what has he shown? What is the sentiment around the building with Chase Claypool? What are they expecting out of him? What's the deal?
A funny fact too, as well. So my wife is a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. News comes down the timeline, and she goes, okay.
Yep.
I was like, what? No worries. We'll be fine. So look, it's slowly been, when you talk about a narrative that's on a little bit of a linear path, this is just a downward slope when we're talking about Chase Claypool. I think the excitement when he got traded was palpable, and I think it was deserved at the time. Now the price tag also kind of ratcheted up that anxiety of, man, this better work, right? And when you finish out last season, you kind of notice that they weren't able to get very deep in the playbook with him. And what they tried to do is just try and get the ball into his hands on a couple of plays. He didn't play a ton of snaps to finish out the year. So it was a real kind of unfinished product. You hear a lot of great news about him coming out of training camp, but look, I am expecting nothing from him.
Perfect.
If you're telling me he can give us 70 plus receiving yards in maybe 5 games this year, which doesn't even sound like a lot, I think that's a plus for the Chicago Bears offense, because of what you mentioned in the headline is that DJ Moore is now in Chicago. And to this point, it's passing every single smell test. The chemistry test with him and Justin Fields is there. You're seeing it in training camp. You've already seen it in the preseason. This guy, I think, has been, kind of tucked away among the NFL elite of wide receivers for the last couple of years with some of the quarterback play in Carolina. Yep. And the guy makes plays, right? I mean, I want to hear how you feel about DJ Moore, because I think he's an old school football player. I think the dude can get separation and be physical at the line of scrimmage. I think he can catch the ball downfield. I think he has no problem going across the middle. I think he has no problem getting yards after the catch. And this is the perfect prototype of a guy. When you say Justin Fields has a hard time reading the field, or maybe his first read, he gets a little gun shy, I think DJ Moore is going to clear some of that up for him and provide them a little bit more of that NFL window room that maybe Justin Fields was a little apprehensive to throw into. I want to get your take on DJ Moore, because I just love him as a football player.
Yeah, I like DJ Moore too. I watched him in Carolina. I was obviously being a former Carolina Panther. I watched that team all the time. Listen, they obviously had some issues with the front office the last couple of years, and it boiled over. I think Chicago should be thrilled to have him. There's 2 things that are going on there. One, he's just a talented, confident guy that knows how to prepare to play well. So he's going to help that room. He's also going to help Justin Fields, that communication. The other thing is, you need to have, if you have a young wide receiver, young quarterback, you need to have a number 1 guy. Like Jordan Love needs Christian Watson to be a number 1 guy. You can't have, we're going to split this up against, Dobbs is going to get, or Chase Claypool is going to get 25. Economist St. Brown's going to get 25. You can't have that. Hey, we need a guy that when things are going bad, and it might be Cole Kmet, when things are going bad, I need to know I can throw you the ball and you will make a play. Aaron Rodgers, look at how much success he had turning someone into a number one guy. I mean, you look at all across the league, somebody becomes that number one wide receiver that you can always count on. Travis Kelce's doing it with Patrick Mahomes now with Tyreek Hill left. Like, it just, quarterbacks need that. It's a security. We always talk about the tight end being a security blanket. The security blanket is really the guy who can get open, right? And I think for this team, I would be very excited about that acquisition. I think all the things he can do on the field, but also the things he's going to do for that quarterback off the field as far as how to prepare it and just how to talk through plays and understand this is what we're seeing and this is how we're going to approach this. So I think that's a big deal. And that rolls into, Joey, really, we're talking about Justin Fields. This is what the Chicago Bears are now. This is the face of the franchise. What are the expectations going into this third season? Luke Getsy's now the second-year offensive coordinator coming out of Green Bay. We're kind of familiar as Packers what kind of offense he runs, but when I watch Justin Fields, it's really interesting, especially in the preseason. We want to get 3-step drops, balls out, right? And it's already predetermined. There's some decision-making things you can kind of look at. And then there's the 5 steps where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And and they're running deep, a lot of deep routes, a lot of crossers. And if it's not there, it's like, bye-bye. It's time to show the other reason that I got drafted so high. And I don't know how that all plays out as far as what they want to see from in the running game, or how many times they want him to tuck and run, what the expectations are for numbers. But where do you think the Bears organization feel like he's at right now? Is he ready to take a division title away from the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers?
Is he ready? I think that he is. But let's just start with what I think expectations are for the Chicago Bears, and most specifically Justin Fields. I think it's twofold this season, unfortunately. I think last year it was a little bit less about wins, a little bit more about efficiency, a little bit more about consistency and performance. We saw that at times from Justin Fields. And now I think both of them have to show up on the field this year for us to feel really confident, especially for a franchise that has 2 first-round picks next year and that Carolina first-round pick with some of these quarterbacks coming out in next year's draft. Obviously a conversation for another day, but it's in the back of our minds, right? So for Justin Fields,
are you saying they would even consider? They would even consider that bringing in a new quarterback? Wow,
100%. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Justin Fields, not Ryan Poles' guy. I think that trade with Carolina, instead of taking that number 1 pick, look, I don't think they liked the quarterbacks that were coming out in this year's draft. I think they wanted to roll with Justin for 1 more year. But once you get to that 4th year, once you get to that 5th year, then we're starting to talk about money. We're starting to talk about the uncertainty of a quarterback feeling like maybe he's on the fence. Are we going to buy in and sign this guy up? I mean, that's when the dollars start to really come into play. So I think this is truly a make or break year for Justin Fields. And I don't think he's going to be bad. He has a possibility to be great. But I do think that middle area, that gray area, is where all that conversation is going to start to come out and start to come into play a little bit. And I'm right there with you. I love watching Justin Fields on the run. I think those unscripted, unpredictable plays, I don't think you can pop them into an AI machine, right? And we can't break those really down with advanced metrics. And I think that's what makes him special and really hard to kind of handicap in terms of his potential this year. But there's a shelf life on that. I mean, he could probably get away with that for maybe 1 more year. Of that, as you just mentioned, 5-step, plant that foot, not seeing it. You got that millisecond of hesitation. Boom, I got to run. I got to go, try and do whatever I can. I don't think that helps with his evaluation within the franchise either. So that's where winning games is going to come into play. I mean, if the Chicago Bears win less than 7 games this year, I think there's a problem. And usually when there's a problem, you're either going to look at the head coach or the quarterback. And I think they may look at the quarterback in this particular situation. And look, I'm not big on, I know everyone's like, he's got to have over 65% completion percentage. Look, Cam Newton never did that before, but
you can't do that.
I think that,
right.
Right, exactly. So get that out of your mind. My thing is in terms of a metric of grading, whether he can be a franchise guy or not. I kind of look at it more as a Cam Newton style personally. And I still think they need to be a run-heavy unit. I mean, they led the NFL in rushing yards per game last year with Justin Fields. You just mentioned that running back room. There's a way where you can have winning football, learn a lot about Justin Fields. He becomes your franchise quarterback and not have him throw the ball 35 times a game. I know that sounds antithetical to modern football, but I think that there's a way that you can figure that out. And it's just going to come down to that consistency. It's a long season. And please just stay healthy. Don't give us 5 games of little banged up, a little hurt. We roll into the offseason of like, well, we don't know until he plays a full slate of games. That's always a huge fear too as well. So I think it's make or break for Justin Fields this year. I really do.
It's always interesting to see how the head coach or the coaching staff vibes with the general manager and the personnel department and how they evaluate or where we place responsibility on developing this player. Is it the style of play? Is it the actual coaching of footwork and decision making? Where does that all fall? And that's when you say, I'm riding with Justin Fields, I'm firing the staff, I'm keeping the staff, I'm letting go of Justin Fields, I'm looking for a new guy. Like there's so much that goes on internally there because quite frankly, we don't know. When I watch, even when we watch the preseason, and I know this isn't a perfect example of what we're going to see during the season, but when you watch it, you're like, a lot of these plays, you're kind of putting him in a situation that doesn't really play to his strengths. He's not on the move. There's a lot of shotgun with a 3-step shotgun, 5-step shotgun. And you're thinking, you don't have a good offensive line, or at least, in my opinion, this is not a top half offensive line from a pass protection standpoint. And you have this really, really good running game. You have these tight ends now where you can go into 12, 21 personnel. You have a bona fide fullback, and you can do so much with those two personnel groupings, and it doesn't feel like they're using him to full strength. Now, we'll see what happens in the games, but getting a guy like this on the move where he can make those decisions, get him out of the pocket, and just, hey, if you have a winning football season, a 9-8, a 10-7 season, and Justin Fields is winning games using that style of ball, there is a shelf life to it, but you also have to develop. And it's like, you can't sometimes what I get really frustrated with in the National Football League is we start going, well, this is year 3 or this is year 4. It's like, if you haven't been coached well, then you can write off the first year. Or if you've been, it's not a linear progression, especially based on, are you changing offenses? Have you changed coordinators? Have you changed quarterback coaches? This stuff matters. And so, I'm not rooting for the guy because I'm not a Bears fan, but just generally speaking, I like watching the guy play. And sometimes I think some of the stuff is out of their control a little bit. He certainly seems like a talent. I hope he has a terrible game on Sunday. But I think your real issue is, Joey, I think your real issue is with running the offense that they've been running. The reason that we see the shotgun, where does Chicago get a stop against the run? You guys have the worst defensive line group I've ever. They're terrible.
It was the worst defensive line I had ever seen in my life as a Bears fan last year. I believe they only got 20 sacks. The leader in sacks was our safety, Jaquan Brisker. Does that sound normal? And what
Robert
did they do?
Quinn was great, and then it's like, where'd he go? I mean, you trade him away. He's
traded him.
I know he's
No, look, I mean, we're excited, and when you get a new general manager, you get a new coaching staff, a new philosophy. When they start talking about we're going to build this the right way, and we're going to go draft by draft, and you have to give them some leeway, and you have to provide a little blind faith in that, right? And so I think so far Ryan Poles has done a lot of things that I've liked. The part that confuses me to this very day is that he keeps forgetting that there is a defensive line in football, and it just so happens to be one of the most important aspects of the game. We can talk all we want about wide receivers and running backs and ball hawking safeties, but when you get to a Super Bowl every year, what does it come down to? Can Patrick Mahomes versus someone's defensive line? It always goes back to the trenches. And for the second year in a row, look, Ryan Poles, he drafted a couple of guys, Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens, developmental projects in the middle rounds of these drafts. Went out and signed Ngakoue for a little bit of cash just to provide you a little bit of a baseline. But other than that, the dude is punted on the position once again this year. And when we talk about Justin Fields, what does it matter if Justin Fields is down by 8 to 10 points in the fourth quarter and they can't get off the field on a 3rd and 6 because they can't stop the run? How does that help his progression? And we all know that when a quarterback plays differently, when he's down a touchdown or two late in the game, he starts making mistakes. He starts trying to force the ball into areas that he doesn't want to. I mean, so look, I think we think that it's going to be a little bit improved, but when we say a little bit improved, what are we going from 32 to 28? In the NFL, what does that do? It's a huge concern. And again, for you guys, I think just to flip it over to your side, if we're talking about Jordan Love and what kind of start does he get off to? I mean, you guys still have A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones on that team, establishing that run and creating some looks for Jordan Love to make some easy throws. I mean, it is a step. It is an opportunity for Jordan Love to get off on the right foot. I just think because this defensive line, I just don't think it has any teeth whatsoever. And I think it's going to be the backbone and Achilles heel of our team this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have some real problems. You talk about Jordan Love, and we have started off 2 out of the 3 preseason games with 12 or 21 personnel. Just what we talked about the Chicago Bears. I mean, we have these 2 young tight ends they just drafted, super talented. I mean, these Luke Musgrave looks like
Musgrave. So Musgrave,
Corvette.
you like it, yeah?
Oh, he looks like a damn Corvette out there. Tucker Kraft's going to be a good player. You know, we've moved some. DeGuara's now playing fullback. We moved some guys around, but we are in a position, and we have like our offensive line. Zach Tom's going to shore up that right tackle position. Bakhtiari is going to be healthy for the first time in a long time, but we'll hopefully see him for the entire season. And when I look at this game in particular, look, Andrew Billings kind of shows up every once in a while on tape as far as being able to bull rush the center or bull rush the guard. He might, Josh Myers, that matchup might be interesting to you. Yannick Ngakoue has been on a downhill slope for the last 3 years. He's actually undersized. He doesn't like to play the run. Like if you guys are thinking about playing him for a defensive end, you have real problems because it's just not about that life anymore. I just don't see. You have a really good linebacker group that we talked about before, but they're not that good if our guards are getting up on him every play. If Elton Jenkins is rocking up, John Reynolds Jr. is every play because they can't stop the double team. It's good. I think that part of the game is going to be super interesting and eye-opening, I think, to a lot of maybe big people in the Bears organization. They know what's going to happen, but we got this good rotation. We drafted these 2 guys second or third round. It's like second and third. Tommy Harris wasn't good. Tank Johnson wasn't good their first year. And Tommy Harris was really, really good later on. He wasn't that good it takes a while. You better have some dogs in that room right now. I look at over here, we got Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary. We got some dudes. I don't know who you have over there. And that might be the difference in the game.
And look, we struggled. And here's the thing that kind of blows my mind. And I'd love to get your perspective on this because I'm just trying to figure out what they think they're doing. Because to me, it kind of smacks of that whiff of arrogance of, well, our scheme can cover up some of this stuff. And we saw it last year. We brought in some guys that were rotational players, gave them bigger roles. It didn't work out because they couldn't handle the weight of that situation. We had discipline issues. We couldn't set any edge whatsoever. I mean, Brian Daboll was literally running the same counter play over and over and over again because we couldn't set an edge last year. And you're talking about that exactly. Like it's all well and good when you're like, oh wow, TJ Edwards had 13 tackles. Well, that usually means guys are getting to the second level. And that means that guys are getting through. So is this come back to like Eberflus thinks that he can just take his scheme with lesser value of talent and just make it work? Because I'm just trying to look at this. This is the second year in a row when we did it. We've done this. And at the end of the year, when we're like, oh, if only our defensive line was better, I'm honestly going to start blaming the head coach for this one. I don't really know what else to do. I don't know if it's a talent issue. Yeah,
I don't disagree with you. Listen, as former offensive lineman, we used to go into games, and it was very simple. If they were good, they didn't need to stun around a lot because they could beat you one-on-one. And if they're not very good and they're moving around laterally, and I'm going to show a little bit of this later on, but when the Bears guys get into these squared up stances and they're like, hey, guess what? We're looping out right now. If you have any read, if you have any good coaching or you know how to watch tape and you see that is all you can eat Sunday specials, right? Your AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones are going to be running all day through that because whenever you start moving laterally, you're weak, right? You just become weak. You become a weak player. If you turn your shoulder pads to the sideline, you become a weak player. And teams are usually doing that in large part. Sometimes they're trying to mix it up, but when it becomes kind of a staple of your defense because you can't hold up against good offensive lines that have good quarterbacks kind of telling them where the pressure's coming from, it becomes very, very problematic. You can hold up for a little while, but especially in today's offensive and defensive systems where we see a lot of 6 in the box already or 7 in the box already, like you're not seeing 8, 9 guys in the box anymore. When you're seeing a small box as is, and now they're moving around, you can average 6, 7, 8 yards of carry for an entire game just because they just don't have people in position to be successful. So I think it's going to be an interesting game. Joey, last thing before we let you go here, what's the final score?
How am I not going to say Chicago Bears win week 1? I got Bears 23-20. And when we say, oh, all right, well, we get over 20 points, that's nice. I think it's going to be a little bit more of, I think it's going to be a little choppy at times. And I think it's going to come down to the 2 running games, if you want to be honest with you. I know we're going to have all eyes on the quarterback with microscopes on both sides there. But I really think whoever can establish the run and control the clock a little bit in that area, control the field position a little bit. I think the weather conditions are going to be fantastic, but I do think it's going to come down to that. Of course, when we're talking about quarterback, whoever's going to limit their mistakes, that's going to be beneficial. But I'm really curious to see. I'm dying to see Jordan Love in action. Hopefully, this is a rivalry renewed. I hate the fact that we have to play the Packers week 1 because honestly, as you know, as a Bears fan, this has been a dark road for me for, I don't know, 30 years. You know what I mean? So getting off the season on the right foot is going to be paramount here. I do think the Bears can win out this year. I do think on the lakefront, first game of the year, I think we'll be able to score some points. I do have them winning, and but not by much.
Well, I think the spread's still just 1 point, right? It's basically it's a coin flip game because the Bears are at home. Yeah, so you just kind of take it away.
I'm shocked we're favored. I'm shocked we're favored.
Well, I mean, we don't know, but you have quarterback questions on both sides of the football, and ours is actually probably worse than yours because they have 2 games of information. So, I mean, listen, I obviously think the Packers are going to win this game, and I think it's going to boil down to your defensive line's just not going to be able to get the job done. It's going to really hurt your ability to tackle in the secondary. I think your secondary is going to have to take chances because of that. Now, if Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs aren't there, Christian Watson not playing would be like a 2.3 point swing for me on it. I think it's a big deal. It's like Travis Kelce not playing for the Chiefs this weekend. If that happens, we just don't know what the outcome is going to look like because I think he's a big part of the offense. But yeah, right now I just feel pretty good about the Packers run game and what they're going to be able to do against that defense. But listen, Joey, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find your show? Tell us a little bit what you got going on.
Yeah, man. Mike, thank you so much for having me back on, man. I love cutting it up with you. Hopefully we could do it again soon. And honestly, man, I learn something new from you every single time. So it's always a pleasure and an honor to be on with you. You can follow me at Joey Sports Guy. I do Believe in Bears with former Bears defensive end Corey Wooten. We're covering the Bears action all season long for the Believe Sports Network, which I am a wonderful teammate here with Mike. And then also, funny news, I'm also now working over at Beyond the Big Ten. You can follow me over at Beyond the Big Ten. I'm producing all the college football shows for them this season, and I'm also hosting the Northwestern Wildcats show.
God, we could have talked for days.
Don't watch the games. Don't watch for the games. Come for the content. And thank God.
What a year to start that job. What a year to start that job, by the way. I mean, you want to talk about content? Big Ten, Northwestern. Oh my good Lord.
I got the gig right before 4th of July, and I was like, this is going to be fun. And within 2 weeks, the program itself is literally crumbling before our very eyes. But I've been a Wildcats fan my whole life. So if we're talking about the ground floor, I'm starting at the ground floor.
Okay, so can I ask you one
question? They play UTEP this week. If they don't win, yeah, please. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, are they going to bring in Coach Niumatalolo? Is there any chance he gets the head coaching job?
I mean, so that's a really
my guy.
Really interesting name. I literally was talking to Corey about a bunch of different names. We've seen the Ed Orgerons out there. The David Shaw. I know Orgeron is just literally the name guy, right?
David Shaw be good.
David Shaw is kind of interesting. But I think your candidate also could be really interesting too, because we need someone that's going to come back in and really get their heels in on recruiting. We don't need a big name, right? We don't need someone who's too flashy or anything like that. We don't need to spend millions of dollars. But with this transfer portal business, this is NFL free agency right here. I mean, the scouting terrain in college football is forever changed with the transfer portal, and we need someone that'll be able to come in there and not only recruit guys that are coming out of high school, but also guys on great programs that need opportunities that can come in and rebuild the depth on the Wildcats roster. And it was a tough game this weekend. They're going to try and get through the season, but I seriously believe that they will have a new head coach next year. So I think that's a great call, though.
Coach Ken coming over. All right, Joey. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. We'll talk to you next time.
My pleasure. Be well.